For the Thank you. Okay. So, okay, friends, welcome back for the second session of the morning, in which I am talking about earthquake disaster management. So, in the first session, I introduced you basically to the importance of infrastructure, more so urban infrastructure, and then told that you have to see to it that this infrastructure is safe under all situations. And slowly I took you on to some of the case studies of earthquake, especially earthquakes that have happened in India, sorry, and some of the vulnerable countries like Haiti, and compared the different countries, showed that wherever you have good disaster management, the chances of damage are, sorry, are sufficiently less. And in the process, there was one good question from one of the participants. I will be very pleased to answer one or two quick questions before moving forward. Any other questions, Idya? If not, I want you to store all these questions for discussion just a few minutes before 1 p.m. And I'll try to answer as many questions as possible after that. So questions ಬಂತು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದೇನ್ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ, yes, we both are in the same page ಅಂತ. Whatever I am telling now, you are able to follow me. Online learning is not so easy. Online teaching is definitely not
ಫಸ್ಟ್
so easy.
ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆಪ್ಪ ಅಂದ್ರಂತೆ.
Okay. So I talked about different earthquakes, and I told you when an earthquake happens, shaking can happen, therefore, the building may collapse, and there can be many casualties. In addition, there will be many indirect effects. I showed you one of the indirect effects, that is fire. Fire can break maybe due to short circuiting, maybe due to the leakage in gas pipes, and so on. I showed you the dust, which may cause environmental pollution. Likewise, there is another important source of severe damage, that is tsunami. We never knew what a tsunami was till that earthquake which happened in Indonesia, which caused approximately about 10,000 deaths in India way back in 2004, December. So, tsunami can be disastrous. Many earthquakes do happen in sea, and if at all a big earthquake happens in sea, it's likely it may cause tsunami. Therefore, very quickly onto that, tsunamis are caused due to the shakings that happen in the bed of the sea. Sea water depth may vary from few meters to few tens of kilometers. In deep sea, the depth of water can be 10 kilometers, 12 kilometers, like that. Below that, there will be bed of sea. If an earthquake happens there, it might disturb the bed. And when the bed is disturbed, entire water on top of that, maybe 10 kilometer, 12 kilometer thick water, it may be lifted up, brought down. So much energy is disturbed, and it has to be, balanced. So that balancing acts through the waves traveling from that place at a very high speed, at a speed of aircraft, something like 600 to 800 kilometers per hour, towards the shore. And when they hit the shore, whatever kinetic energy these waves have, they get converted into potential energy, and taller waves are formed. And these waves at the shore hit anything they come in their way. It could be a building, it could be a tree, And if that building is able to survive, it is okay. Otherwise, the force of the wave will be so much that building may collapse, and hence it may create damage. There have been many instances of tsunami causing huge amount of death. So quickly, tsunami may be caused due to any of these, and mostly it is the earthquake which creates the problem. It is due to the violent movement of the floor, bed of sea. And what happens? Earthquake happens below the bed of sea. So one portion of the bed may move upwards, another portion may move downwards, and all these will result in lifting up so much water and bringing it down. To balance this energy change, there may be horizontal movement of waves at a very high speed, and they come and hit the shore and cause bigger waves, and that's what is tsunami. And that's also shown here. uh, when the floor moves, entire water on top of that moves up and comes down, and hence there will be huge generation of tsunami waves. Tsunami waves are much different from the regular wind waves which you see in sea. The wind waves do have very small wavelength. Tsunami waves have wavelengths, which are very, very large. Huge amount of water comes at once to the place. And I just want you to have a look at how a tsunami wave would be in the form of a small video. You can see that, this is some structure, maybe a tourist attraction. People are there here, and suddenly from nowhere the wave has come. So you can see how much force these waves will have. Fortunately, in this case, the structures are very strong and stable. There has been no damage, there has been no problem. You can again see here, one more wave comes. See, it is coming. So they come and hit like this. Luckily, the height of this floor here is much, much more than the wave height. Therefore, not much damage has happened. And the building, entire building is on rock and very sturdily built. So there is no problem. But the impact force of these waves can be so high, vulnerable buildings get collapsed. So why I mentioned this is, I told you about Japan. It's one country where the knowledge about earthquake engineering is good, knowledge about earthquake disaster management is good. Therefore, you don't see much casualties. So I just take you on to this earthquake which happened in 2011, March 11th. It's also called, East Japan earthquake. It's a country with many, many islands. The
Huh?
main island is called Honshu Island. Capital city of Honshu Island is Tokyo. It is in the middle and more towards east. On top of that, towards east of that, about 350 kilometers away, there is one city called Sendai. About 50 kilometers to the east of Sendai, in deep in sea, this earthquake happened, and because of that, there was tsunami effect. Please see the magnitude of earthquake 9. Magnitude 7 is very big. Magnitude 8 is 10 times bigger. Magnitude 9 is 100 times bigger. This is in logarithmic scale. So any increase from magnitude 9 to the next one, 9.1, it may be 150, 200 times, and so on. So every increase in magnitude can increase the power of the earthquake, the energy which is released to a large extent. This time it was magnitude 9 earthquake at a focal depth of 25 kilometers and about 175 kilometers from Tokyo. Okay, I mean about 375 kilometers from Tokyo City. Generally, for a civil engineer, this graph is important. You don't need to be worried. Just by magnitude, you may not get much idea about how damaging an earthquake is. So you need several other supporting documents to show the damaging effect of earthquake. And we call this graph as seismogram or strong motion accelerogram, where on the vertical axis, ground motion in the form of acceleration is given. On the horizontal axis, the time taken or time of shaking is given, the duration of shaking is given. So, generally, a big earthquake will last for not more than 60 seconds. But in this case, strangely, the earthquake lasted for nearly 5 minutes, 300 seconds. And the peak value of that will be something like zero point 0.1 g, zero point 0.2 g. When I say zero point 0.1 g, it is zero point 0.1 times acceleration due to gravity. So if I take acceleration due to gravity as 9.8 meter per second squared, approximately 10, zero point 0.1 g is about 1 meter per second squared. And in this case, the acceleration, peak acceleration was close to zero point 0.5 meter per second squared. I'm sorry, 5 meter per second square, zero point 0.5 times g. And shaking was for almost for 5 minutes. There were many aftershocks. Aftershocks amounted to more than 400 in about a month's time. And these aftershocks continued for a year or so. And because of this, this was such a powerful earthquake, one of the biggest to have struck the globe. Entire Honshu Island, which is approximately one tenth of India, it was moved by 2.4 meters. That was the power of the earthquake. And the researchers say that Earth redistributed its mass, and due to this, the day became shorter by 1.8 microsecond. That's the power of this earthquake. So effect is that about 25,000 people were killed and majority of them in tsunami. They were prepared for this also, but they were not prepared for this huge tsunami. So lot of damage to infrastructure and lot of houses were either damaged or destroyed, leading to huge amount of economic loss amounting to approximately 350 billion US dollar. So satellite picture before and after the tsunami shown at a place here. Whatever you see in black indicates sea. So the sea is serene, silent before the earthquake, before the tsunami. But after tsunami, you can see lot of white patches, not only in sea but also in land. In land, you go away from sea, there are mountains, and at some points, there are reasonably high mountains also, and you see many white patches in sea as well as in land after the earthquake. That is because tsunami waves came and hit those buildings which blocked them. Some of them managed to survive, some of them collapsed. And the waves after that, they moved into the land, up and up. Since there was mountain, so they stopped somewhere and the waves went back to the sea. When they went back to the sea, they collected all those debris and they took them to the sea. Also, some of the waves, wherever low-lying area were there, they were, stored in those low-lying areas in the land. So whatever you see here are some of the things taken away by the tsunami water into the sea, the white patches in sea, and many white patches on land indicate the places where the sea water came and got collected at many low-lying areas. So lot of mess happened immediately after the earthquake and then tsunami. Whereas before, you can see how silent the entire land as well as sea are. I showed you an example of what a tsunami wave would be. Here also one more showing how ferocious these waves will be. And if the buildings are built strongly into the ground, well anchored, maybe they will survive. But for that, you need to have a pakka foundation built. And effect is that something messy like this has happened. Cities in Japan are very clean, very organized, but you can see this total mess because entire area is flooded with seawater. This is a typical building, it perhaps survived the earthquake. There was no problem during shaking. Tsunami happened only after the earthquake, several hours later, and this building could not survive tsunami. You can see the mess in the entire city, lot of water and so much which has come out. It's all because of the effect of tsunami. Many strange things do happen due to these disasters. And in this case, tsunami saw to it that the ships all the way came from sea to the land. You can see motor cars also around. Maybe these ships were moored in sea. They wanted to see how land is, and they simply came to the land. Such strange things can happen. And here, it appears that these motor boats are trying for a high jump. There is a wall next to them, and this is a tsunami wall, sea wall. Japanese knew about the problems associated with tsunami, and they had built walls about 5-6 meters high. And this wall definitely withstood the tsunami. Even it withstood the pressure given by the boat. But only problem was the height of the wall was 5-6 meters. But this time, tsunami waves were even 20-meter high. And hence, you know, this wall could not really function the way it was required. Only consolation is that the wall is well built, therefore no damage done. And if this wall were to be 20-meter high, perhaps the city inside would not have been affected to the same extent. This picture shows the airport in Sendai flooded with tsunami water. You can see everywhere water, even runway is simply flooded with water. And in the next picture, you see that all that water has gone back to the sea. And when it went back, it simply deposited silt. The thickness of the silt here was more than zero point 0.5 meter. In fact, they needed lot of effort of earth moving, of clearing off these silt, and the runoff runway. Every place was cleared in a couple of days because so much soil, so much silt was deposited there. These are all indirect effects, of an earthquake, which you will not even realize, and you will be prepared for many things, but suddenly some other thing will happen, and you should be able to handle that as quickly as possible to bring back normalcy. And that is what is the challenge during disasters. Yeah, in this picture you see it appears like toys. Only children can have aircrafts and cars together playing with them. So here again in the Sendai airport, all those aircrafts as well as cars were, simply swept away by tsunami water into some low-lying area, and hence they were all dumped in this low-lying area. So this is the only occasion other than what children play with. You can see the aircrafts and cars dumped together in a low-lying area. So these are all some strange things which can happen during earthquake. Still, this building and this bridge is safe. It survived not only the earthquake but also tsunami. And imagine if this bridge also were to be damaged, the loss could have been plenty. So Japanese are known for good construction, and in this case, the construction of the bridge was good enough, even though the shaking due to earthquake was of very rigorous shaking. The bridge survived, indicating the importance of quality of construction. Another strange, unwanted thing that happened was the damage to the power plant. This is called Fukushima power plant, nuclear power plant. There also, about 80% of the power is obtained through nuclear power plants. There are also hydel projects, hydroelectric projects. This was catering to almost one third of Tokyo City. And this is the nuclear reactor. It was not very far from sea. It was hit by sea waves, tsunami waves, causing an explosion. You can imagine what is a nuclear explosion. Extremely dangerous. And this was one of the worst accidents to have happened. Almost next only to Chernobyl accident or Chernobyl radiation, which happened in 1980s in Russia because of the human error, causing lot of problems to the people, animals, plants in the nearby area. Japan has not very clearly mentioned how much is the damage due to it, but radiational effect has been so severe. I'll not be surprised if even thousands of people are affected, animals affected, plants affected, and affected people, will continue to have the effect for years. Sometimes even their offsprings, their children, grandchildren may be affected. So this was another indirect problem which happened. I'm posing this because in India also we have the nuclear power plants. In Karnataka we have Kaiga. In Tamil Nadu we have Kalpakam. Have we taken care of them? Earthquakes they may survive, they may be built to be strong, but there may be some tsunami happening somewhere else, some other country. And tsunami waves, if they come and hit these reactors, will our reactors be strong and stable to take care of? So these are some challenges. Anyway, government says no worry. You don't need to be panicky, but we all should be prepared. So during earthquake, something like this will happen. Messy roads. So water with slushy soil from below comes onto the road, and something like this may happen. So these are all some strange things to happen. So here the building appears to be well built, but it is built on a sloping ground, on a foundation, and the ground actually moved down, slipped. So when the ground slipped, even though the construction is good, there was no way the building could survive. So it is not enough if the construction is good. If the quality of material is good, you should also see to it that the ground is strong. And these are all some challenges which everyone should be knowing about. Again, I took this picture from internet. See, this is a two-lane road on a gentle slope. It appears that this slope is man-made slope. And out of this two-lane road, one of the lanes at the higher level, close to the higher level, it is stable. The other portion of the lane, it has slid down. It is like somebody has taken a scissor and cut it into two halves. I don't know how this was possible, but the lower portion, it slid down, and very clearly indicating that maybe the ground was stable at the top, not so stable at the bottom for various reasons. We don't have any other explanation to give. Such strange things do happen during earthquakes. Here it appears that these two ladies are climbing up Everest. This used to be a level ground before, but the effect of earthquake, the ground is pushed up, and hence these people have to literally climb up to reach out to the other side. This was a picture taken by my professor. His name is Professor Tawhata. He was my PhD guide. Again, in close to Tokyo after the earthquake. So I don't know whether you can guess what it is. These are manholes. You know where manholes have to be? In India, manholes are built out of brick masonry. Here, they are built by precast concrete, material like this. And these manholes decided to come up after the earthquake. Such strange things do happen. So there is also one more manhole somewhere here that also has come up halfway, but this has come almost full. And we can give a technical explanation for that. It is due to a problem called liquefaction, wherein buried structures are lifted up, brought up. And I do not know, maybe manhole was, you know, dull being inside the ground. It wanted to come out and see what is there above ground. So it chose this earthquake situation to come up to the ground. So this is what happens during earthquakes. One other problem is, whenever you have sloping grounds in a hilly terrain, when an earthquake happens, landslides are common things. And that's why you can see many landslides in Himalayas, especially during earthquakes. Landslides do happen because of heavy rains or flooding water. So once the landslide happens, it is very difficult to stop. You remove the soil, further soil comes down. Very, very difficult to control. And in this case, because of the big earthquake, there was landslide at this place. And you can see that, the road is blocked. You remove the debris, some more debris comes up. Very, very difficult to retain them, which is a challenge. So I always say, nature is supreme. We simply cannot control nature. We sincerely work to understand nature. Day by day, our knowledge is improving. And we respect nature. We have to respect nature and build something to protect ourselves. So progressively, we are improving. What we were 10 years back, compared to that, we are better now. What we were 20 years back compared to the 10 years back, we are better. So every day it has been a new learning, and it's important to improve our knowledge and sincerely put in efforts to understand nature and protect ourselves from the calamities. I showed you the problem associated with Haiti. Problem is the buildings were not well built and hence they failed. Not only that, after that they had not taken care to bring back normalcy. Even 2 years later, the same debris continue to stay. Why? Because they didn't have people to do the work, they didn't have the capacity, they didn't have money, they didn't have resources. Whatever debris were there, they continue to stay for 2 years. You can imagine, you had some problem several years back, and even today you keep seeing that. Psychology of the people, you should understand. So always, whenever there is a disaster, bringing back normalcy is important. And in that regard, Japan does a very good job. Within a day, almost lifelines are brought back to normal. Within several days, the buildings are repaired and brought back. And that's one of the very, very important objectives of disaster management. So what it was before is shown on the left side, and within less than 1 year back, i- improvement in the within less than 1 year after the damage, after the earthquake, improvement is shown here. Here also, what it was during the earthquake and 1 year down the line, what it was during the earthquake 1 year down the line. So they bring back normalcy at the earliest, which is another important objective of disaster management. Let's quickly move over to the earthquakes in India. I told you earlier, you don't need to be panicky. Karnataka is a very stable place. But earthquakes are unpredictable. We should be prepared. Secondly, you will not always stay in Karnataka only. You might go to an earthquake prone area. And if an earthquake happens, you should be prepared. You should know how to handle yourself. So, little on the earthquake problems in India, we say approximately 60% of the country is earthquake prone. We divide the country into 4 zones. Seismically least active is zone 2, seismically most active is zone 5, and in between comes zone 3 and zone 4. Where, intelligently removed zone 1, there is no zone 1. Zone 2, seismically least active, that means you will not have big earthquakes happening often, and you will not have earthquakes causing ink. In zone 5, earthquakes do happen frequently. Every year there may be one or two big earthquake, and the amount of shaking is enormous. So you'll have to construct your building according to the situation. In zone 5, you require much more earthquake resistant construction, whereas in zone 2, you don't have to bother so much. And here you see a number of big earthquakes that have hit India in recent past, 1993 onwards. This is what I said, 1993 Latur earthquake. You know, we had absolutely no idea that an earthquake of that magnitude can hit Latur. It was considered to be free from earthquakes. Suddenly, an earthquake happened, killing 20,000 people only because the buildings were unengineered. The buildings were not built properly to take care of the earthquake effect. So then you had an earthquake in Jabalpur that also went as a surprise. People were not prepared. Bhuj earthquake, we knew, Gujarat is prone to earthquakes, but we didn't know that it would hit in 2001. And they say that, the next big earthquake can happen in about 150 years return time. So we'll have to wait for 150 years, or maybe it can happen tomorrow only. That is the unpredictability of earthquakes. So we had earthquakes in Nepal, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Myanmar, which influenced India also. As I said, the country is divided into four zones: two, three, four, five. Blue in zone two. Fortunately, most part of Karnataka is in zone two. Only the coastal Karnataka and northern Karnataka are in zone three. And zone 3 is seismically more active than zone 2, and zone 5 is worst. You see some portions in west Gujarat, some portions in the north and northeast in Himalayas, and also you have in the Andaman Nicobar Islands, zone 5. Delhi is in zone 4, which is also seismically very very active, and we should be careful. Latur earthquake I mentioned, magnitude 6.3. We never thought that there can be a big earthquake like this. Focal depth 12 kilometers. And it happened on the 30th October 1993, early in the morning at 4:30 when all people were asleep. Simply the shaking was so big that walls could not resist. Walls fell down. Roof supported and wall came down. People were sleeping under this roof and they perished without any warning early in the morning under this sleep, killing about 20,000 people. So, purely it is the bad construction which was responsible. If at all people knew what they should do, probably 20,000 could have been 200. So, the masonry walls were not built properly. The bricks will require them to be overlapped in the form of keys so that they don't slip off easily. You require rich mortar mix to connect them together. Probably they were all missing because they didn't have good engineering knowledge and they wanted to save money. And this is where I say earth- earthquake disaster management is important. As I told earlier, the place where the earthquake happened is not far from many cities in Karnataka. Bidar, Gulbarga, Bijapur, Raichur were not more than 100 kilometers away from the place. So you can see what happened to the buildings. You can see how the buildings had simply collapsed. Most of them were built on stone masonry, which is generally very strong. Unfortunately, not very well placed. Therefore, the force of earthquake was good enough to dismantle them. I'm just interested in showing some other earthquakes, before, closing my lecture with some important message. Nepal happened way back in 2015. In fact, we were at that time running a workshop or running a one-day symposium on earthquake engineering at NI, and sometime around 11:30 or so, the earthquake happened. And we were all deliberating on earthquakes, and suddenly this earthquake happened, killing
You
about.
you call, sir. You called it. You called.
Hello.
Sir.
Okay, please do keep your volumes down when you are speaking. Thank you. And so two earthquakes happened in a span of about 15 days, one 7.9 magnitude, another 7.4 magnitude. So magnitudes I have mentioned here, focal depth I have mentioned here, and I just want you to see the CCTV recordings just during the earthquake. Some of the learnings can be definitely better. So here you can see all tall almiras loaded with heavy books, etc. They are very vulnerable. So the city, this is Kathmandu city. Cities in Nepal are very similar to those in India. An earthquake happened. People knew that they had to come out of their buildings because buildings are the most vulnerable ones. All of them came and stood in the middle of the streets. Even the building in the circle, it was dismantled. So you can see that the plants and are shaking because of the earthquake. This guy, he comes out from the building onto the terrace area or so. He does not know what to do. He's luckily the building has not collapsed. So just want you to have a look at several CCTVs which have collected the information. You can see the shaking suddenly started. Therefore, the plants are shaking. You can see, this earth mass is also shaking. Luckily, no damage done. Even the pots filled with plants, somehow they managed to be stable here. But they're the most vulnerable ones. They can, fall down. You can see how the fan is oscillating. So any chandelier or fan, hung onto the roof is very dangerous. We have to be careful. And this is probably a museum or so. Tall statues, they just could not stand. Of course, agony, then people are given health care immediately. Okay, I'm not very, very keen on this in this lecture. So that also has to be strengthened. So you can just see, life is normal. Policeman is relaxing and then he makes some commands, but people don't bother about his commands. Everything is going okay. Suddenly, ground shakes, people realize the shaking, and they stop. And all people, they move towards the center, and all the vehicles have stopped. But this car, even though he knows what has happened, he wants to go. He's in so much urgency, but somebody stops him. So everybody will come to the center of the street because it is better than the buildings. Luckily, no damage done. And some people walk off later. Okay, they walk off thinking that, okay, they also are safe. So this is how the situation would be immediately after the earthquake in any place. And we should see all those things, experience, and try to understand what we can do. Okay. Yeah, again, here also, life is normal, vehicles moving, people inside the buildings. Suddenly, some identify early, some little late, and hence, people stop. Yeah, and everybody started coming towards the center. So, they just want to save themselves. Therefore, they run to the center. Some people come out of their buildings little late, and so on. Okay. So usually when the shaking is happening, driving also will be difficult. Therefore, the best thing is to stop driving, keep the vehicle parked at one place. And if it is a two-wheeler, be very careful that can topple and petrol may come out and it may cause fire accident, and so on. So, Nepal earthquake, which happened in 2015, killed about 10,000 people, purely again because the country was not prepared. Many buildings, collapsed. And after that, treatment also was difficult. Roads were narrow, ambulance, fire engine could not come inside, and hence, lot of problems happened. And why these earthquakes happen? Well, there are many theories. So some of you may have studied science, geology, you will be knowing. One of the important reasons is plate tectonic theory. Globe, Earth is divided into many plates. We can identify 12 major plates. Each plate moves relative to one another continuously, 24 hours, 365 days. We have Indian plate. We also call it as Indo-Australian plate that moves northeastwards at about 5 to 10 centimeters every year and hits into Eurasian plate. And that is why our Himalayas are formed, and these Himalayas are considered to be active, and even today they are increasing in their heights because continuously Indo-Australian plate is subducting inside the Eurasian plate. So you can see here in Japan, in Nepal also, it is the Indian plate which moved into the Eurasian plate, causing the earthquake. And during the process, if there are some protrusions, one of them may hit against the other, causing the earthquake like this. So plate tectonic theory is one which clearly explains, and hence, at the time of earthquake, due to plate tectonic theory, one portion of the ground goes inside the other or on top of the other, causing what we call as fault, a line where one portion of the ground is separated from the other. So this is how the Indian plate is continuously moving northeastwards. Millions and millions years ago, India was somewhere here, somewhere here, and it moved northeastwards like this, and it continues to move further. Okay, some of your geologists would have studied about it. Because of that, some portions in the ground will be lifted up, some portions in the ground will be brought down. So during the Nepal earthquake, some portions experienced about 1 to 1.5 meters of drop. Some of them were lifted up by 1.2 meters. Kathmandu was actually lifted up, whereas the other place, Gorkha, was brought down. And now the knowledge about earthquake engineering is fairly good. There are many places across the globe which can identify any earthquake immediately. So this is one agency called USGS, United States Geologic Society. So it was able to predict immediately after the earthquake how many people may die and how much would be the economic loss. And whatever predictions happened were very, very close to the reality. So this is how a road can experience a crack due to the fault formation. One of the very popular sightseeing places called the Hara Tower, which had about 200 mm, tourists inside that during the earthquake, was simply brought down. It perished. It could not stand the earthquake. I think all people inside were trapped. So many tourist places also were affected during the earthquake. So just want to show the effect of force of the earthquake. Here is a swimming pool inside a star hotel, and it is silent, absolutely silent. And there is a CCTV which is capturing it. Earthquake happens, and see how the silent water gets agitated and waves are formed. I just want you to see that, to have a feel of the power of earthquake. Everything looks very silent, no problem at all. Suddenly, earthquake happens, and hence the CCTV shakes. Okay, now CCTV is shaking, but no problem to the water. Water is still nearly say silent. Slowly, water is agitated, and it is getting agitated more and more. Along with the CCTV itself moving, you can see how the water is agitated. And after some time, the water comes up like this, waves are formed. So in a still pond after earthquake, this is what happens. So imagine when an earthquake happens in sea, the entire water here is shaken. And see something like this, you have no control. That's what is the effect of earthquake. So I always say the best way to explain is, let us say you are standing on a carpet and somebody pulls the carpet. That is the kind of experience you will have when an earthquake happens on ground. Okay. So I just skip this. I also want you to see this earthquake which happened in Mexico. One earthquake happened on 7 September 2017. 12 days later, another earthquake happened. The first one had higher magnitude, it was more powerful. The second one had lesser magnitude, but it was closer to city of Mexico, causing about 400 deaths. Mexico is prone to earthquakes. Very often there are earthquakes. And I just want you to see the video taken by the CCTVs during the earthquake. That really gives you a feel about how things would be. Sorry. Please see this. See, in front of your eyes, if a building known to you collapses. See, there is warning, people are whistling, people are giving signals, and they don't know what to do. The best thing they can do is, they will take support of the wall, of the columns. How loose things and plasters, come down, you can see. Amount of dust created. See, the building known to you, if it collapses like this. See how there are two buildings close to each other. Each one swings differently. And when they swing differently, they will hit against each other.
No mames, Tania, güey. No mames, Tania. No, no mames, Tania.
So it's some amusement park or so. There is a water body here. People are having recreation. See how much the waves are generated. See the blasting. Fire breaks out, and hence it may cause an explosion like this. Likewise, there can be many casualties. I'm going to stop here. So now, very quickly, I will give you some knowledge on earthquakes and earthquake engineering. And the ill effects I have shown in terms of photos, in terms of videos, in terms of past histories, you will be able to learn what earthquake can do. So one thing you should know is, all of you should have awareness that the building you live in should be safe, strong. So it should be built with a quality engineering treatment. So it should be good materials used, An engineer who builds should have good knowledge and they should be safe. And at the same time, you should know when an earthquake happens, what immediately you need to do, how you have to try to save yourselves. And you should have some knowledge about earthquakes. Some of you may be science graduates, some of you may be having some knowledge of geology and so on. So, earthquakes are the vibrations that happen at the ground surface. And these vibrations happen at ground surface because at some depth below there will be a source of disturbance. And that source of disturbance will cause waves which move in all directions. Those waves which move upwards and inclined upwards, they hit the ground and cause vibration. And that's what is earthquake. And please note that earthquakes are unpredictable. So, a lot of things can happen. Something like this is also a possibility to happen. So, please note when I say unpredictable, it is not easy to predict when the next big earthquake happens, where exactly it happens, what will its magnitude be, what will be its focal depth, how long will be the shaking. All these things to predict is very, very difficult. And some important terminologies you should know are the point where the earthquake happens inside the earth, we call it as focus. A point exactly below the focus on the ground surface, we call it as epicenter. The distance between these two, we call as focal. Naturally, epicenter is a place on the ground surface. Below that, the disturbance would have happened. If the disturbance is at shallow depths, the earthquake is dangerous. And if you are closer to the epicenter, the effect of earthquake is more. This is what you should know. And earthquake results in shaking of the ground in all directions, left, right, up, down, and all these things, even the rotational shaking. We say that earthquakes are most dangerous because they are the ones which cause a lot of casualties. Past records show that more than 50% deaths that happen due to natural disasters or during earthquakes. More than 50% buildings that collapse during different natural disasters is because of earthquake. Therefore, you need to take earthquakes with much more carefulness. And which are the biggest earthquakes? There have been many big earthquakes in the past. We were able to record earthquakes only about 100 years back. Therefore, the biggest earthquake which we have recorded is sometime in 1960, whose magnitude was 9.5. That happened in Chile, South America, and caused tsunami wave in totally opposite direction in Japan 24 hours later. So that is the biggest earthquake which is recorded. Did we not have big earthquake before? We don't know. We didn't have the measurements done. But we talk about in our epic Ramayana Mahabharata Pralaya catastrophe. Maybe they were all due to these earthquakes. So interestingly, there have been big earthquakes. Last 20 years, there have been many big earthquakes that have hit the globe, and majority of them had tsunami. So I'm not trying to create any alarm, but I want you to know that there can be big earthquakes in future. They may cause tsunami. In on land, if you are away from sea, you don't have problem with tsunami. But when you go to a sea front, there is every possibility you should be prepared for that. So earthquake causes horizontal force on ground, and hence their effect is different from the normal situation. A civil engineer should be prepared to understand that and should build their buildings to be strong against the shaking caused by earthquake. And earthquake and wind have somewhat common effects, but they are different. A civil engineer should know. So earthquake will cause, vibration, vibration of the buildings, and building should be able to withstand that. So due to that vibration, the building may topple, building may experience sliding, or building may bend. And this is what an engineer should know and try to withstand that. I just skip this and tell you that Earthquake causes acceleration. We all love acceleration. We want to go in our vehicles, at very high speed. Accelerations do happen when you know, uh, do this bungee jump or so, in the air. So you will be accelerating under gravity downwards at about 9.8 meter per second squared continuously until you open the parachute. So when you open the parachute, the speed with which you come down is reduced because of the air resistance. Otherwise, you'll be traveling at about 9.81 meter per second squared acceleration level when you fall from a height. You travel in a roller coaster in an exhibition in Disneylands, you will have acceleration as high as 4g. 4g stands for 4 times acceleration due to gravity, approximately 40 meter per second squared. Even in aeroplane displays, aerobatics, you can expect about 9g. Even when you shake hands, you will have acceleration. So the race cars may have acceleration fairly high, something like 0.2g, 0.3g. So they may go from 0 to 60 kilometers per hour speed, in 1 to 1.5 seconds. And I just try to calculate the level of acceleration an Indian car would develop at very high speed, approximately 1.5 meter per second squared, 0.15 g. But big earthquakes have created acceleration as high as 30 meter per second squared, 20 times more. Not in one direction, all three different directions. Therefore, earthquakes are massive. Just a simple, refresher. You all know between husband and wife, there is always that, interaction. Especially during birthdays, they will have more excitement. Both husband and wife will want gift from each other. So wife has her birthday soon. Husband will ask her, what shall I get you for this birthday? She gives him a riddle. She says that she would like to have something which accelerates from 0 to 100 in 10 seconds. I'm sure you'll understand what she has in dream. She definitely dreams of a very good car, a gift of car. But what he brings, she says 0 to 100 in few seconds. So he brings a weighing balance. Naturally, you know how much upset the wife would be. So she would see to it that her husband is in ICU immediately after that. Okay. So acceleration is created during the earthquake, which is the major cause for shaking. And all those structures which can withstand them will survive. If not, they're going to cause problems. I told you two important things. One is magnitude and another is intensity. Magnitude talks about power of earthquake. We express it in general in Richter scale. But in particular, there are different scales, but the most important one we call as moment magnitude, MW. You don't need to be bothered. You simply say Richter scale. It's a mere number. When magnitude is 6, earthquake is big. Magnitude is 7, earthquake is very large. Anything more than 7 can cause huge amount of loss. 8 can be extremely dangerous. 9 is something you can't imagine. 50% of the people will be affected. So every earthquake has only one magnitude, you should know. There is also another terminology called intensity. In India, we use MM scale. Stands for modified Mercalli scale. It depends upon the place. It depends upon our knowledge of earthquake engineering. It depends upon how good our structures are. It depends upon how much our ground shakes. So intensity we measure in scale from 1 to 12. 12 is pralaya, total catastrophe. If there are 100 buildings on a street, all 100 buildings collapse. 1 is something which you cannot imagine. And whenever the intensity is more than 8 or 9, you should be bothered about. So magnitude 6 is 10 times smaller than 7, 100 times smaller than 8. It is an exponential scale. And when the number is more than 6, I want you to be careful. So 6 to 7, 10 times bigger. 7 to 8, 10 times bigger. So it's like 6 magnitude earthquake is small hillock, and 7 magnitude or 8 magnitude earthquake is like Everest. Or if you are fond of playing with crackers in Deepavali season, 6 magnitude earthquake is small patakis. On the other hand, 8 or 9 magnitude earthquake is like atom bomb. You can play with small patakis in hand, but atom bomb you cannot fire in hand because it not only makes sound, it also releases a lot of energy. So magnitude of earthquake
Yep.
is the amount of energy released. And intensity, we have from 1 to 12. 12 is total catastrophe. And we develop what we call as isoseismal map after the earthquake that will let us know the contours of equal intensity. Naturally, if you are closer to the epicenter, the intensity will be maximum. And in some cases, the maximum intensity will be 10. In some of the very bad earthquakes, it can be 11. I have not seen so far 12. 12 is everybody die, every building collapses. So 10 and 11 very dangerous. Even intensity 9 is dangerous. People get confused between magnitude and intensity. Just to compare, I give an explanation through an electric bulb. You have electric bulbs of different wattages. 40-watt bulb is having less illumination than 100-watt bulb. So wattage is very similar to magnitude. Magnitude 7 earthquake is more powerful than magnitude 5 earthquake. And every bulb will give the light. If you are closer to the bulb, light is more. It is in terms of flux, in terms of lumens explained. And if you go away from the bulb, lux decreases, lumens decreases. The closer you are, the brightness is more. So the lumens or the brightness is very similar to the intensity. If you are closer to the epicenter, intensity is more, and if you go away, the intensity reduces. Very quickly onto earthquake disaster management. People would have told you a lot of things about it, and one of you participants also mentioned about this. Disaster, I don't have to explain. It is something where majority of people in an area are affected. And disaster management, you reduce three important things. You reduce the loss of life, you reduce the loss of economic loss, and you bring back normalcy at the earliest. People must have explained to you disaster management theory. There are several things you have to do before the event, during the event, and after the event. And one simple equation I always put is hazard plus risk is equal to disaster. Hazard is something which you cannot control. You cannot have you cannot stop an earthquake. But risk is what we create, we human beings create. If the risk is more, naturally it becomes disastrous. If the risk is less, the disaster can be reduced. If the risk is zero, disaster can be very much controlled. So risk is in our hands, and disaster management is always bringing down risk. Risk can happen due to all our man-made problems: population growth, unscientific construction, irregular industrial development, lack of space, environmental pollution, so many things. And we need to control them. And always, you have the risk index, which shows about the hazard or exposure and the vulnerability, okay, which is to be controlled. So this risk index is given worldwide, and I'm very not so happy to mention that India is not in a very good position from the possible from the position of risk index. We are somewhere in the middle, 45th or so out of about 180 odd countries. We need to improve from this point. There are many countries which are quite safe, and India is not among the safest places. and especially our cities are quite vulnerable. So, objectives of earthquake, I told you and I have listed a few of them. I'll anyway be sharing this material with your coordinators. Therefore, you can go through them. And with respect to disaster management, I always told you that you need to be prepared. Places like Japan, every year they will have 1 or 2 drills for everybody from 1 or 2 year old child to 90, 95 year old age person. And all that preparedness will help you during an event. And immediately you should respond well and you should recover. And always you should have scientific methods to build structures which are earthquake resistant, to know how to manage, and that's what is mitigation. So preparedness, response, recovery, mitigation are some of the branches of disaster management, and some are done before earthquake, some are done during and after earthquake, which you should be careful. That's what I have listed here: preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. And in general, in disaster management, always best thing is prevent. Don't ever try to think about curing. So prevention is better than curing. So should you prevent the damage. So do all that whatever is possible. And if that cannot be avoided, then you think of curing. So curing is done after the event, after the problem, but prevention is done before. So a lot of work is necessary before, and I have listed a few of them here. And these disasters do happen during nights in cold season when it is raining. You have to be very capable of handling all those disadvantages and still managing and bringing back normalcy, and that is the biggest challenge. Who are all responsible in disaster management? It is the government, it is the public, it is each and every one of us. So there is no, buddy who can say, I'm free from that. All of us have to take equal responsibility. Every one of us will have to work towards reducing the damaging effects. We call some of them as lifelines. Nowadays, mobile phone is our lifeline. We cannot live without that even for a minute. And the telephone, the water, drinking water, electricity, these lifelines have to be restored at the earliest. So, so these are all the lifelines, we have to be very careful with. We have to restore them. Even the roads, the railway, we have to restore them. Some of the disaster managements in Japan, immediately after the earthquake, all trains will be stopped. And quickly they will check the tracks, electronically. And if everything is fine, within minutes, they will start continuing the train movements. And if the train service is stopped in Japan, they say that it is disaster. Normalcy will be totally, affected. So disaster management training is very important. As I mentioned, mock drills. I experienced every year at least once or twice. And we need to have the disaster preparedness, like kits, and individuals should all have good expertise experience of that. I used to keep disaster kit at my home in front of the main door, and that used to even carry some food like noodles, prepared noodles. And every once in a month, I used to change the fresh one. So we were prepared for the disaster with the disaster kits. And there are lessons displayed on the notice boards about how to manage. So basically, people are explained not to panic, not to run. They should know where to go. They should go below the table and things like that. And all these are instructions which are given. And people especially the policymakers, will have to work very effectively. They have to take strong decisions. It is they who take decisions, and common man has to simply follow. If we also try to take decision, it will be a mess. So there will be warning systems like this: warning of tsunami, warning about the possible fire, warning about shaking, all displayed on the TV channels and every place. And this is how the TV channels would give isoseismal map. And if you know that, all people can read the map and they can understand where they stand, where they are. If they are at a place where the intensity is more like 10 or 11, they will be very careful. They will probably go below a table and take shelter and wait for the other order. If they know that they are in place where intensity is 7 or even 8, they know that the damage can be hardly anything. They just enjoy the earthquake and then continue to do the work after the shaking stops. So isoseismal map will give you enough warning. This is how people regulate, control during an earthquake, during a disaster. This is the kind of disaster drill, disaster announcements the officers make like this. But people will have to be very peaceful, very silent. They know that it is a panicky situation, but they should never panic. They should never take law into their hands. They should never confuse people, confuse everybody. Everybody have to just listen to the orders from the officers. And this is what is done in places like Japan. Very good control system they have. Sometimes you cannot stop disasters like earthquakes and the rescue. People should be given warm clothings. People should be told where safe places are located, like school buildings or some auditoriums. They are given shelter there, warm clothing are given, food, medicine are given. People are made to wait there until all the problem is sorted out. And this is what some of you are mentioning. You can take shelter under sturdy tables. Children are also taught in schools, and people are told to take protection behind a strong column, because columns are built much more strongly than other components of a building. In India, you can't do that. You don't know. Columns may be vulnerable. So that's where that awareness is very, very important. These people are actually taking shelter behind a column. I'm just going to stop. This lady is trying to see in the map where is this rehabilitation center and where she should go. So I'm going to stop here and just mention to you, go to the last part, saying that earthquake resistant construction is essential for important structures, or almost why important all the structures, especially in a zone which is earthquake prone. In India, we have four zones. Zone 3 and above, they are all called vulnerable zones from earthquake point of view. And it's very important to build every structure, safe and strong. And you might think that it may be costly. The cost is very marginal if you want to make it earthquake resistant. But the amount of satisfaction, amount of confidence with which you can live will be very, very large. So the cost increase may be only 1 or 2%. If you are spending, let us say, 1 crore on your house, you may have to spend instead of 1 crore, 1 crore and 1 lakh, or maximum 1 crore and 2 lakhs. But the safety is one which would have come to your building. So cost is not going to enormously increase. And in general, whatever I explained are very minimum, very minimal. I only want you people to go through all these things, in future, and then I wish and hope that government will create many awareness drills. Some things you learn practically is more important than just the theoretical one, and hence, you have a feel of it. So with this, I close my lecture thanking the authorities of University of Mysore for giving me this opportunity, and especially my good friend Dr. Nanjun Swami. I'm now open for questions. I'll be very happy to answer to any of your questions. And those of you who are busy, you can ask your questions, and then if you are busy, you can leave. Others, I'll be very pleased to answer as much time as you are interested in. And I thank each one of you for your patient listening. There was one question, and I expect more questions also. With this, I come back to the original mode. Yeah, and I don't know, I'm not able to start my video. Okay, it's coming. Yeah, so I'll be very pleased to answer your questions. Yeah, if you have a question, please unmute yourself and ask.
ಸರ್ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ.
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಮೇಡಮ್.
ಸರ್ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸ ತುಂಬಾ ಮಾಹಿತಿಯಿಂದ ಕೂಡಿತ್ತು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಒಂದೇ ಮಾತಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳೋದಾದ್ರೆ ಆ ದೃಶ್ಯಾವಳಿಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ನೋಡಿ ಮೂಕ ವಿಸ್ಮಿತರಾಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿವಿ ಸರ್. ಆ ಥರ. ಆದ್ರೆ ನನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಏನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಈ ನ್ಯಾಚುರಲ್ ಅಥವಾ ಮ್ಯಾನ್ ಮೇಡ್ ಪ್ರಾಕೃತಿಕ ಅಥವಾ ಮನುಷ್ಯ ನಿರ್ಮಿತ ವಿಪತ್ತುಗಳೇನಿದೆ, ಈ ವಿಪತ್ತುಗಳ ನಿರ್ವಹಣೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಜಪಾನ್ ದೇಶ ಹೇಗೆ ತನ್ನ ಚಿಂತನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಅಥವಾ ಥಾಟ್ಸ್ ಅವರ ಪ್ಲಾನಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಯೋಜನೆಗಳೇನಿದೆ ಅವುಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಏಕೆ ಇದು ಇಂಪ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳಕ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಸಮರ್ಥವಾಗಿ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥ.
ಓಕೆ, ನಾನು ಆಗಲೇ ಹೇಳಿದೆ, ಏನಂದರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶಕ್ಕೂ ಜಪಾನ್ ದೇಶಕ್ಕೂ ತುಂಬ ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸ ಇದೆ. ನಮ್ಮದು ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ದೇಶ. ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಎ ಡೈವರ್ಸಿಫೈಡ್ country with totally diverse people, language, culture, caste, religion, everything. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಒಂದೇ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಸೇರಿಸೋದು ಅಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಈಸಿ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಆನ್ ದಿ ಅದರ್ ಹ್ಯಾಂಡ್, Japan is a much smaller country. Almost everybody is illiterate. They had experienced huge problem during World War. They know that the growth of the country is when they are united, when they listen to the orders very honestly. ಸೊ ಆ ಥರ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಏನಾದರೂ ಒಂದು ಹೊಸ ಎಜುಕೇಷನ್ ಕೊಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಅಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಕಷ್ಟ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಆದರೂ ಈಗ ಏನಪ್ಪ ಅಂತಂದರೆ, we are better than what we were some 10 years back, 20 years back. Our knowledge level, technology, growth, economic standards are increasing. So ನನ್ನ ಭಾವನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ in future we will definitely be able to reach to certain level. Day by day we are better. What we were 20 years back, 2001ನಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗಿದ್ದ ಅರ್ಥಕ್ವೇಕಿಂದ ಎಷ್ಟು ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಆಯಿತೋ, ಪ್ರಾಬಬ್ಲಿ ಸಿಮಿಲರ್ ಅರ್ಥಕ್ವೇಕ್ ಟುಡೇ may be able to provide much better comforts and knowledge improve ಆಗಿದೆ. ಸುನಾಮಿ ಅಂದರೆ ಏನು ಅಂತಲೇ ಗೊತ್ತಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಆವಾಗ ಸುನಾಮಿ ಆದಾಗ ಪೀಪಲ್ ವರ್ ಜಾಗಿಂಗ್ ಅರ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ ದಿ ಮಾರ್ನಿಂಗ್ ಆನ್ ದ ಸಿ ಬೀಚ್ ಇನ್ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಚೆನ್ನೈಯಲ್ಲಿ. ದೇ ಡಿಂಟ್ ನೋ ದಟ್ waves were coming and they were taking their lives. Animals like dogs which were on the beach, they were able to sense and they went to the safe places, but people had no idea, and that's how many people perished. Now we have the awareness, so slowly things are improving, but the scale with which it is improving has to be improved. ನೀವು ಏನು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಅನಿಸಿಕೆ, ನಿಮ್ಮ ಅಪ್ರಹೆನ್ಷನ್ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಿ, I agree, but there has been some growth, and all these awareness camps which you have now, it is because of such things. I'm hoping that next 10 years things should improve much more.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಸರ್, ಧನ್ಯವಾದ.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಮೇಡಮ್.
ಬಟ್ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳ್ಬೇಕು ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ನನಗೆ. ಈಗ ನಾವು ಮೊನ್ನೆ ನಾವು ಟಿವಿನಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಈ ಕೆರೆಗಳ ಪಕ್ಕ ಅಪಾರ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಕಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ಕೆಲ್ಲ ಅವಕಾಶಗಳು ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದಾರಲ್ಲ, ಈ ತರದ್ದು ಬಂದಾಗ ಇದು ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂತ.
ಹೌದು ಮೇಡಮ್, ನಾನು ಇನ್ ಜನರಲ್ ವಾಟ್ ಐ ಬಿಲೀವ್ ಇಸ್, ನಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರಕೃತಿ ನೇಚರ್ ಏನಿದೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಇಂಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಇಟ್ಟಿರಬೇಕು, ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಡಿಸ್ಟರ್ಬ್ ಮಾಡಬಾರ್ದು. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದಿ ಮೇಜರ್ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಥಿಂಗ್. ನಾವು ಸಿವಿಲ್ ಇಂಜಿನಿಯರಿಂಗ್ನಲ್ಲೂ ಅದನ್ನೇ ಕಲ್ತ್ಕೋತೀವಿ. ಈಗ ಅದನ್ನೇ ನಾನು ಮೊದಲನೇ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು, ಮೊದಲೆಲ್ಲ ಎಕಾನಮಿ ಸೇಫ್ಟಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿದ್ವಿ, ಈಗ ಸಸ್ಟೈನಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಏನು ನೇಚರ್ ಇದೆಯೋ ಅದನ್ನು ಉಳಿಸ್ಕೋಬೇಕು, ನಾಟ್ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಫಾರ್ ಟುಡೇ, ಈವನ್ ಫಾರ್ ಟುಮಾರೋ. ಸೊ ವಾಟ್ ಎವರ್ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಡೂಯಿಂಗ್, ದೇ ಆರ್ ಆಲ್ ಡೆಫಿನೆಟ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ ಸಮ್ ವೇ ಆರ್ ದಿ ಅದರ್ ದೇ ಆರ್ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಅಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಸ್. ಸ್ಲೋಲಿ ದೇರ್ ಈಸ್ ಎನ್ ಇಂಪ್ರೂವ್ಮೆಂಟ್. ಈಗ ಟೀಚಿಂಗ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಸಸ್ಟೈನಬಿಲಿಟಿ, ಅದನ್ನು ಆಮೇಲೆ ಇಂಪ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋತೀವಿ. ಬಟ್ ಅಷ್ಟರಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ಅನಾಹುತಗಳಾಗಬಹುದು, ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಮೆನಿ ಆಫ್ ಅವರ್ ಎನ್ವಿರಾನ್ಮೆಂಟಲಿಸ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಸ್ಟ್ರಗ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಕ್ರಿಯೇಟ್ ಎನ್ ಇಂಪ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್. ಹೋಪ್ಫುಲಿ we will learn by the mistakes. And population growth ಸಿಕ್ಕಾಪಟ್ಟೆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಲೋಷನ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, and that is one major thing which can cause problem. Another major thing ಅಂದರೆ illiteracy, lack of awareness, and ಅವೆರಡುವೇ ನನ್ನ ಪ್ರಕಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಕಂಟ್ರೋಲಿಗೆ ತರ್ತೀವಿ ಫಾರ್ ದಿ ಫ್ಯೂಚರ್ ಜನರೇಷನ್ ಅನ್ಕೋತೀನಿ. ವಾಟ್ ಎವರ್ ಯು ಸೆಡ್ ಈಸ್ ಪರ್ಫೆಕ್ಟ್ಲಿ ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್. ವಿ ಆಲ್ ಶುಡ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ದಿ ಅವೇರ್ನೆಸ್. ನೀವು ಹೇಳಿದಂಗೆ ಕೆರೆಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮನೆಗಳಾಗಿ ಕನ್ವರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಕಾಡುಗಳನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ನಾವು ಕಡಿತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ವೇರ್ ಶುಡ್ ದೀಸ್ ಅನಿಮಲ್ಸ್ ಗೋ? ಮೆನಿ ಎ ಟೈಮ್ಸ್ ವಿ ಟಾಕ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ಚೀತಾ, ಟೈಗರ್, ಆರ್ ಎಲಿಫೆಂಟ್ ಗೆಟಿಂಗ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ದ ಸಿಟಿ. ಪಾಪ ಅವ್ರ ಜಾಗನೂ ನಾವು ಆಕ್ಯುಪೈ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋತಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಅನದರ್ ಡೇಂಜರ್. ಸೊ ಹೋಪ್ಫುಲಿ ವಿ ವಿಲ್ ಲರ್ನ್ ಬೈ ಅವರ್ ಮಿಸ್ಟೇಕ್ಸ್. ಗ್ಲೋಬಲ್ ವಾರ್ಮಿಂಗು ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ವಾಟ್ ಎವರ್ ಹೈ ಸೌಂಡಿಂಗ್ ವರ್ಡ್ಸ್ನ ನಾವು ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಲ್ಲ, all these I hope we are going to reduce. If not, next generation will have lot of problems.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.